So Aaron, how is flipped learning really helping children as it relates to career development or career planning?
Well, certainly my goal as an educator is to teach students how to think and how to solve problems. So there's a lot of conversation in education about training students to be workers in jobs that don't exist yet. So if we don't know what jobs are going to exist, we can't train students to do a particular task. We have to train them to be able to think and adapt and be able to find information on their own. So giving students access to all the information that we could possibly think of and teaching them how to mine the internet and to mine other resources for what they need, that's a very, very valuable skill. In addition to that, I work a lot with schools and school districts and colleges teaching them about the flip model, but I've had a lot of corporations calling me now asking me to train their trainers on how to teach new hires and adult learners. So when students get into the workforce, they're going to be experiencing this model of instruction for on-the-job training. So I'd say it's all the better to learn it now.
Yeah, and it can be used in any setting, and
Right.
certainly within the workplace to really help to develop careers as people continue to migrate and change in different careers.
Certainly.
As it relates to the use of technology, though, I mean, there are in some instances where kids don't have internet access, they don't perhaps have computers at home. How would they be able to really benefit from flipped learning?
Yeah, when I started doing this in my own classroom in Colorado, I had 25% of my students who didn't have access to the internet at home. Now, some of those students had a computer, so for those students, I would put the video content on a flash drive and send that home with students. Other students, I would burn the video onto a DVD and send that home. And for my students, I was able to meet all of their needs through those methods. Now, not everybody's going to have that same experience, but I think we would be surprised at just how many students have a smartphone in their pocket, and you take a smartphone anywhere where there's Wi-Fi, and they can get online and get content. Actually, I've talked to some I talked to some teachers recently who have actually called some local coffee shops and were able to get student discounts where they'll give the students a cup of coffee or a beverage for next to nothing, and they can use the Wi-Fi while they're there. You've got your local public libraries. You've got Wi-Fi it's all over the place, so students can access that. One other thing is teachers can write grants to try to get a hold of maybe a handful of devices that they can send home with students. Whatever that may be, don't let that be your out. It's a legitimate concern, and you absolutely need to provide access for your students, but there are a lot of different ways to overcome that barrier.
And most kids have access to some form of a phone, a laptop, what have you, and can certainly get it if they need to visit a library or things like that. Speaking about technology, Dan, you had a quote earlier that was pretty terrific in terms of technology. If you'll share that with us.
Yeah, I think, well, when people talk about flipped learning and any type of new fad, some people call it, they say, well, it's going to be here and then it's going to be gone. But I think Aaron and I have both seen that flipped learning, while it's new in the technology sense, we're not using new ideas. We're using project-based learning. It's been around forever. We're using mastery grading. That's been around for 50 years now. We're using these old methods, but the technology is letting us use them in new and more exciting ways. And so going forward, 50 years from now, are we still going to be doing flipped learning? Alan Kay once had this quote, and he said that technology is everything that was invented after you were born. Everything else is just stuff. And so eventually, will our method be the only one people use? No, it'll just be stuff, part of the system.
Great quote, very interesting. Can you give us the sense of just how widespread this is, though? I mean, and how many teachers or school districts are using it or getting ready or on the fringe to actually start implementing some level of flipped learning in their classrooms?
Yeah, I helped found a nonprofit organization called the Flipped Learning Network, and part of that we have a professional learning community. Right now we have about 24,000 educators signed up for that who are contributing ideas into that community. So that's a number I can look at and say, okay, there's at least that many people doing it. My own experience, I've been all over the country providing professional development, and I will be in 12 different countries by the end of this year alone. So internationally this is really catching on as well. We worked with a group called Project Tomorrow, my nonprofit group did, and through some data that they collected, we had some flipped learning questions in there. And a couple of years ago, it looked like roughly 10% of teachers were kind of interested in adopting the model, and about 16% of administrators were interested. while the number of teachers, the percentage of teachers has not changed a whole lot, the number of administrators is up to almost 40%, that they're hearing about it, they're interested in the concept, they want their teachers to start trying it, so there's great interest.
But that's where it starts anyway, right? You have
Oh,
to
yeah.
have the administrators on board
Sure.
in the school district, and then of course it filters down with the teachers and into the classroom. So that's a great place to be at this point.
Well, if I could jump in there, actually, sometimes, and I've seen some of the best success with this, because this is so time consuming, because you need to have that drive. I think maybe you'll agree with me, some of the biggest successes in flipped learning is for teachers that just kind of scrounged around and made it happen. I know at my school we have computers, but we're not one-to-one. However, there was a laptop cart that nobody was using, so I decided this is mine now. And I took some surge protectors and I turned my room into a computer lab, and all of a sudden we were up and running. And I told the administration about it, but by the time they saw it, the product was finished. I think sometimes it's that grass level or grassroots movement, the teachers figuring it out on their own.
Yeah, actually some of the best implementations I've seen have been kind of a grassroots groundswell with support from the top. You never want to be doing anything on either side of that scale. Administrators having teachers do something they're uncomfortable with, or teachers doing something that the administration is uncomfortable with. But teacher buy-in with support and just really energetic teachers is really the best way to go.
Dan, I'd like to go back to the point that you just made, just for some level of clarification about the 30 students.
Sure.
If you'll just elaborate on that a little more for us.
Right. So the way my class is set up, I mentioned this before, it's set up like a video game. Video games are extremely motivational. People will play the same level of Candy Crush and Angry Birds over and over and over again. Well, why is that? It's because they have these built-in game elements. They have points, and they have levels, and they have badges. So my class is sort of set up that students have a great deal of autonomy. They can choose what path they want to take. They can choose my prescribed path, or they can do a variation on their own. They can go off and acquire badges on the side, similar to how a Boy Scout might just go through the system, or they might go for Eagle Scout, and they might try to do all of those side units. So last year when I ran this course, my students have the ability to move on at their own pace as they demonstrate mastery. So everybody might start at the same place, but after a month or 2 or 3, the students that read quickly, the students that like writing papers, the students that are really go-getters, they might find themselves several weeks ahead. Whereas other students will just stick to my prescribed path, and then some students need more help. And the good news about it is I'm no longer stuck in front of the room saying the same thing to everybody. I have that flexibility to give enrichment to the kid that's ahead, to give extra support to the kids that are behind, and of course to offer a structure for those students that are in the middle.
And let's see if we can drive down and really focus maybe on a student who you have seen excel in this, where otherwise they may not have. Maybe they typically don't do well in the classroom setting, and this flipped learning model has really made a difference for them.
I have a student, and she came to the high school I was teaching, just not a great student, kind of awkward, didn't really fit, very, very intelligent, but just never really played the game of school very well. I mean, school is a game. It has rules, and if you play by the rules, you get rewarded. And some students really resent that. They really just want to learn. They don't want to have to jump through hoops to get points. So, I think she really gravitated towards science and had an interest in things scientific, but again, still wasn't a great student, didn't quite fit in. Then she got to my flipped chemistry class, and also my colleague John's, his flipped earth science class, and realized that we weren't about complete all these things and get the points. We were all about learning. Did you learn? Prove to me that you learned. Show me that you've learned. So over a couple of years, she really garnered this interest for chemistry and then wanted to do an independent study with me. And as a result, she invented this thing that she could basically charge her cell phone at night using energy that she collected from the sun and stored in oxygen and hydrogen that she had split through a device that she built. So this awkward student who didn't really like school or anything, she's actually now studying chemical engineering and will be graduating with a degree in chemical engineering next year. So that's one of my own personal success stories, and I hear stories like that all the time. So, we design schools we shoot for the middle and we hope we get the most. And generally speaking, we get most of the students, but we always disenfranchise the fringe, the kids who struggle, the kids who don't fit the mold, and the kids who are, off the charts crazy smart. But if we can design for that fringe and build a flexible learning environment where where everyone can have their needs met, then everybody's going to benefit. And we're going to have more and more stories like that of kids who would previously have been disenfranchised are now able to become chemical engineers.
Yeah, that's a great story and a great outcome for a student who clearly just needed a different learning model in order to be successful. So any final thoughts, anything you'd like to add?
I had a student, he said to me last year, he was a student that had struggled before in English, he told me. And at the end of the year, I was doing a survey and asking them how the first year of flipped learning had gone for them. And one quote he said was, "When you do the flipped learning lectures, you're talking to me. When you do it for the class, you're talking to everybody, and I feel left out." But I thought that element was important. When, even though it's the same content, and even though I'm the same teacher, and maybe it's the same PowerPoint, so there's something about that video that you're talking to you. And so I think that's one of the elements that stood out a lot to me.
Yeah, when a lot of people hear flipped classroom, flipped learning, they think, oh, it's all about video, using video as a teaching tool. And that's where it starts. And that's a powerful element to shift the direct instruction to the individual learner, because that's what we want to do. We want to go from this large group instructional model where we're shooting for the middle and hoping we get most, to delivering instruction to an individual student, giving them control over the when and the where that they consume it and the number of times that they can go through the content, so that we can get that class time back. Because it starts with using video as a teaching tool, but it's so that we can reinvent the classroom space and to make that more of a rich learning environment for our students.
On demand, which is what kids definitely are used to, because they can go to any device and pick it up when they want, and learning should be no different, and certainly getting that additional education via the way that they learn, which is great. So, well, thank you so much, gentlemen. We appreciate you being here on the show.
Thanks.
Thank you.